Hello, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I'm your host. For anyone who doesn't know, I've recently launched a Substack where I write articles, and I've also launched a new paid podcast on there. So if you want to subscribe to that, it's a great way to support me if you like my content. And of course, the content on that podcast is different than the kind on this podcast. And of course, I write articles on there. Some are free, some are paid. And also, for anyone, again, who doesn't know, I offer services such as one-to-one calls, guidance, audio recordings, email guidance for anyone who wants my specific, one-to-one guidance on something that they're going through. I'm not a therapist. I say this a lot, but I think it bears repeating. I'm just somebody who has worked a lot on my own struggles, and it seems that a lot of what I talk about resonates with other people. So if you're interested in any of that, all the links will be in the show notes below. For today's episode, we're going to talk about something that I think is very important for anybody else who is an overthinker, a ruminator, a pre-planner, figuring it all out like I am. And that's about how there's a reason that thing is not making sense. And I say this as somebody who tries to really get to the bottom of things. I love a good mystery. I love investigation. I love coming to conclusions. I love closure. I need things to be closed. And that's something that I've had to work on a lot throughout my journey because life doesn't always give you closure, unfortunately. Not everything is black and white. Not everything is, all in or all out. There's all just a gray area. And the one thing that I have struggled with a lot is the fact that when something doesn't make sense, I try to find how to make it make sense because I don't feel at peace or at rest unless it makes sense to me. I cannot allow it to not make sense because that feels like a loss of control. And I'm sure anybody else out here who struggles with control issues and the fear of losing control understands that. But I'm here to tell you that if it was meant to make sense, whatever this is that you're going through, that person, that circumstance, whatever, if it was meant to make sense, it would make sense. You would not have to try this hard to make it make sense. You wouldn't have to jump through hoops. You wouldn't have to do mental gymnastics to understand why and what to do and how it should be looking and what this thing meant. If it's not making sense, it's not making sense. And it's important to accept that. The fact that it doesn't make sense is exactly what you need to know. That's the information you need. Because I think for a lot of people, this has to do with relationships, right? But this can apply to different aspects of life. But let's think about relationships because I feel like that's, a more tangible example to use. But say you're dating somebody and their behavior, the things they say, the things they do, whatever, just isn't adding up. It's just not making sense. It's not feeling straightforward. It's not feeling like authentic in certain ways. You're kind of left confused all the time when you hang out with them or when you talk to them. There isn't a level of flow. That's it. That's all the sense you need to make out of it because that's what you need to know about them, that they just don't make sense. They're not a person who makes sense. And, this isn't to shame that person. It's not really about that. It's just that it's for you to understand that some people aren't even aware of the fact that they don't make sense. Some people have discrepancies in their behavior. They don't realize their truth, and so they don't know how to express it authentically. They don't even see that within themselves. So when you are then dealing with somebody like that and you're getting really confused and frustrated, sometimes you might end up internalizing that and thinking, oh, that's a me problem. I'm just not understanding it. I'm not seeing the truth behind it. It's me. I'm confused. And a lot of the times it's not you. It is that thing is just, that's what it is. That's how it's functioning. That's how it's flowing, And it's not up to you to understand it. It's not up to you to make it make sense. And that isn't also to say that this person is in any way wrong or bad or, you're better than them or anything like that. This is just for you to find a little bit of peace and solace about this and allow yourself to just accept that there's a reason this isn't making sense. And it's because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for you, right? Your sense of the world is different than somebody else's. For them, that behavior makes sense. For them, it's what they need to do and how they need to function. And maybe if they were dealing with somebody like them, that person would make sense to them. But for you, it's not making sense, and that's okay. There's a reason why it's not making sense, and that's the reason that it's not meant to make sense to you. And it's not your job to, send yourself into a spiral trying to figure it out and make it make sense. And why did this happen? And why couldn't I do this differently? If it was meant to flow, it would flow. And it's not flowing. There's a lot of friction. And it's important to be mindful of that. Things that are friction-full are usually not right for you, right? And this isn't to say that there are some things in life that are just meant to be and it's right for you and it's all, of course, like there's no way to 100% know that about anything, right? The only thing you can know is how much force and effort you have to put into something. Being aware of that and recognizing that the fact that you have to put that much effort and force, and that isn't to say that you don't have to put effort into things, of course you do, but to that extent, to have to do, backwards flips to make it make sense, to make it work, to make it function, it's not meant to be, and that's something that I've had to really allow myself to accept. And I'm not a super spiritual person by any means. This isn't to kind of lean into spiritual bypassing or anything like that. It's more something that I've had to tell myself to just calm myself down a little bit, as somebody who overthinks, as somebody who feels out of control when I just don't understand everything. It's okay to not understand it. Some things are just not for you to understand. They make sense to other people. There's a lot of things in life that make sense to a lot of people that you cannot wrap your head around. And that's a good thing, right? There's a lot of, dark stuff out there that makes sense to some people. But for me, it'll never make sense to me, no matter how much they try to convince me of it, right? And that's good. That's a good thing. It does not have to make sense to me. That isn't to say that you can't, objectively look at things and be like, okay, I can kind of maybe see why they would think that way. Like, I think having objective awareness of anything is valuable in certain ways. But it doesn't mean you have to make sense of it. It does not mean it has to align with you. It does not mean it has to be something that you wrap up in your own sense of self-worth, as in, when it finally makes sense, then I'll feel worthy that I finally understand it, as though you're somehow, dumb or stupid or invalid for not understanding it. No, some things are just not understandable in, a more wholehearted way for you. And that's fine. That's a good thing. Again, you don't want to be able to fully understand a lot of things in life that other people understand, because some of them are not great. Some of them are not aligned with your values and morals, and that's totally fine. And the fact, again, that it's not making sense is exactly what you need to know about that person or that circumstance. And I hope this was helpful and calming to somebody else who struggles with this and allows you to let go of it a little bit. I know it's easier said than done, because I struggle with this a lot. It's something I still struggle with to this day. It's hard for me to let go. It's hard for me to not solve the mystery. It's hard for me to just accept that it's an unsolved mystery, a cold case in a sense. But some things are, and that's what you need to know about it. That it is something that you cannot wrap your mind around. It'll never make sense to you. And it doesn't flow, and it doesn't align with you. And that's what it is. Again, I know it's easier said than done, but the fact that it's not making sense is the only sense you need to make of it. There's a reason why it's not making sense, because it's not aligned with you. So let go of that thing that isn't making sense. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to solve it. Don't feel like, you're not justified in your existence because you're not understanding somebody else's strange behavior or behavior that just doesn't make sense to you. You're fine. You're valid. Of course, always be objective of your own behaviors and stuff. Look at yourself, have self-awareness, but don't always think that it's somehow your fault or that you're inherently flawed or awful because you can't make sense of somebody else, as though that's your responsibility in life to just be accommodating to everybody. It's not. It doesn't make sense, and that's it. That's all you need to know. And you probably only want things in your life that make sense. You're worthy of having things that just make sense to you. There's nothing wrong with that. And again, I think this ties into the idea of things only being valid if you have to struggle for them. No, that's a story that you've probably been told, you've been conditioned to believe is true. Things can be easeful, things can flow, things can just make sense and fit. And you're worthy of that. You don't have to fight for it. You don't have to claw your way towards it to finally get it. It can come to you naturally. And that's good. And that's just valid for you. And now you can let go of the things that don't make sense, the things that are, full of struggle, and realize that they're just not aligned with you. And the things that will just naturally make sense to you, that will flow with you, will enter into your life when you let go of trying to make sense of those other things. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this was insightful. Again, all relevant links are in the show notes below. I would really appreciate if you left a review of this podcast. That'd be really great. And yeah, I'll be back again next week with another episode.